A list of mania. Think less but see it grow.
Hello everybody, it's the Lawn Gnome and welcome to a very special May 2019 10 for 12. If you are new to my channel, first of all, let me just say welcome. It is a pleasure to have you. And for all of you returning, I'm pretty sure that if you are a book reader or a booktuber or just love books in general and love to talk about them, this is one 10 for 12 that is going to make you super excited. So, as we all know, in the beginning of June, BookCon is going to be held in New York City at the Jacob Javits Center, and unfortunately I will not be attending this year, and it really makes me upset because apparently this looks like it's going to be an amazing year. And one of the other things that makes me really sad is that a lot of YouTubers who do in fact call themselves members of the BookTube community will be at the con, and I will not have the chance to meet them. And I still would like to try and make an effort to come into the city. I mean, I do work there, so I still would like to get an opportunity to meet you. If you are hanging out in the city before and after BookCon, it would just be great to say hello, shake your hand, just say it's a pleasure, I appreciate you, I appreciate your videos, but who knows. So, because of the fact that I will not be going to the con this year, I still wanted to celebrate BookCon and, more importantly, celebrate the BookTube community, because the BookTube community has had its highs and it has its lows, and thanks to new things that are taking place, more collaborations, an amazing tag that was put out there by Books with Alyssa J, the BookTube Real Talk tag, which I unfortunately will not be doing myself, but I wanted to do a BookTube-themed 10 for 12, just showing my appreciation for BookCon and the community. And luckily, this ended up being a true 10 for 12. I have got 11 other members of the BookTube community joining me for this amazing 10 for 12. I don't know if all of them will make their videos on time, but all of them, whenever I see a video show up, I will post a link in the description box of this video, so hopefully you will manage to see 12 of these videos. And please, if you were not included in this 10 for 12 collab, don't be afraid to make your own take on this video, because it is awesome, and I really feel that it is a great way for you to get your name out there, because we're going to be talking about the 10 books or book series that we read because BookTube influenced us to do so. Now, that does not mean that they basically said read this book or die, but basically there was so much interest, so much hype around books that it just gave me the incentive to pick them up and read them for myself. It includes a bunch of things like supporting YouTubers who tried to become authors, books that I had always heard about but never actually decided to read, books that I never heard of before in my life and just thought that the story was so great because the YouTuber who reviewed it was so passionate about the story, I had to give it a read for myself. And some of them are even books that I had on my own shelf for years and never picked it up, but thanks to BookTube or the film community or just YouTube in general, I finally dusted these books off of my shelves and I read them. So without further ado, here are my 10 favorite books or book series that I read specifically because of BookTube. The first book is a book that I had to get because I wanted to celebrate and appreciate the author. The author was a YouTuber named Sarah Ella. She was a great friend to me and a great booktuber. She doesn't make videos anymore, but she was one of the few people that really supported my channel, was willing to get to know me. She got to know myself and my wife. We've talked on Skype. It's been a while since I have chatted with her, but one of the things that I knew about her when I first started watching her was the fact that she was making her own urban fantasy book trilogy. And I had said to her that the minute that book comes out, that first one, I will pick it up and I will read it. Do not send me an ARC. I want to pay. I want to support you. And especially considering the fact that while writing this trilogy, she had fallen on some hard times, so it was all the more reason for me to support her. And that, of course, was the trilogy that started with Unblemished. I really appreciated the writing style. It was very different, and even though I really wasn't a fan of things like romance or love triangles, I still wanted to give it a shot. It didn't end up being my favorite book series, but I will still say that I applauded Sarah for a job well done. She is definitely going to move on to bigger and better things, and there are a lot of people that really do like this trilogy, and I'm glad that she found her market. So if you haven't read the Unblemished trilogy, I would definitely say give it a shot, and if you actually take a look in the acknowledgments, you will will find my name. It is kind of crazy to believe that a book is actually out there on bookstore retail shelves that actually has my name in the pages of this book. That is kind of crazy. Sarah, I hope that you are well. Great job with this trilogy. I'm really excited to hear how your next project goes. The next book is also part of a series, and it is The Maze Runner. Now, I haven't read the last 2 books, but I did in fact want to make sure that I read the trilogy, because a little bit of a backstory for me is before I started making YouTube videos, I really found a lot of time for reading. And I had read The Hunger Games, I had read The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo series. There were a lot of series that I had already read that were very popular on BookTube. But The Maze Runner was a series that I had not heard about, and it ended up being one of the most talked about series in the BookTube community at the time. And of course, they were written by James Dashner. So when I heard that it was sort of like The Hunger Game with boys instead of mainly female characters, I said to myself, okay, I gotta check this one out. And I gotta say, it was a very interesting story. It's not one of my personal favorites in terms of writing style, and I was also quite surprised with how different the film versions were from the books, and quite frankly, I think the films are more exciting and better than the books. It had a little bit of warming up, especially with the dialogue and the slang that they used, but it was still a very interesting one. I did appreciate the fact that it kept you guessing till the very end of each book, and while it may not be one of my favorites, it was just great to finally get truly back into reading with a series like The Maze Runner. The next book that I want to discuss is a book that is part of a duology, and it is Wolf by Ryan Groudon. This book was toted by a YouTuber in the community that I do not follow. I don't even know if she's still making videos anymore. We sort of really lost communication, and that is Kayla over at Kayla Rain. She talked about this book in her channel, and one of the main reasons that really got me to want to read it is the fact that it involved an alternative universe as what would have happened to the world if Hitler and the Axis actually won World War II. She said that it had a little bit of a Hunger Games vibe, but probably one of the most intriguing parts about this book was the fact that the main character is the name that my sister has. The main character's name is Yael. That's my sister's name. As someone who actually has relatives who are Holocaust survivors, I was really curious to see how they were going to put Jewish representation into a book that really comes off as an alternative sci-fi, fantasy, if you will, kind of book based on some alternative history. And of course, this made me want to read books like The Man in the High Castle, but this book was definitely an exciting roller coaster ride, and this follow-up, Blood for Blood, is a very different story in terms of atmosphere, in terms of character development, and the duology really is one of the better duologies that I have ever read. And if you have not read Wolf by Wolf, and you do like series like The Hunger Games and The Maze Runner, you will probably enjoy this one a great deal. Check it out. The next book, of course, is in a series once again, and this series is still growing, and that is the Ransom Riggs Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. Now, this was not recommended to me by any specific booktuber, but a lot of booktubers talked about it. The reason why I read this book was because I wanted to read it before the Tim Burton movie came out, because when I found out that this was going to become a movie and that Tim Burton was going to direct it, I was like, okay, I gotta read this book. It's very different from the movie, but the movie is okay in its own separate ways, but this story is just so whimsical and weird and bizarre. I just absolutely love where this story went when it came to its first 3 books, and this past year the 4th book came out, which I believe is going to be the beginning of a brand new series of 3 books, so I'm waiting for books 5 and 6 whenever they may happen, and that of course started with A Map of Days, and it really took the story in such a different direction than I anticipated it. But of course, what everybody likes about this book is something that I truly like about this book and its counterparts, and it's the fact that there are really cool-looking, vintage, creepy photos all throughout the story. But I love the characters, I love the story. It really is one of those stories that is unlike anything else in current stories that are being written today. If you have not read them, and you like the stories that are from the bizarre and the strange, I would highly recommend that you check out Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. And also, if you are someone that likes things like X-Men, you will probably appreciate this too, because it has a little bit of an X-Men vibe to it, which made me even more intrigued to read it. The next book is part of one of the most well-known and most beloved children's classic series, and that, of course, is The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis, but I'm really referring to the entire 7-part Chronicles of Narnia, because I had read Harry Potter, I had read Lord of the Rings. I always knew that this was one of those books that I had to read. I had to read this 7-part saga, especially after seeing the Disney movies and really enjoying them. I just said to myself, one way or another, I am going to read the Chronicles of Narnia, but I needed BookTube's help. I actually reached out to a whole bunch of BookTubers at the time and said, will you guys buddy read with me? This was one of the first few times where I actually did buddy read, and it was also one of the main driving forces for me in regards to reading other books later on. I really enjoyed as a whole this entire saga. There were some books that were better than others. This one is definitely one of the best books in the series. I mean, it's one that kids even read in middle school. But I also have to admit, I think the movie is a little bit better in terms of the changes that they made for the story, but I do love the Chronicles of Narnia. It turns out to be really what I anticipated it to be, and I'm so glad that I can say I finally read the Chronicles of Narnia, and I thank BookTube for that. Okay, now we're going into our top 5, and guys, I think you guys are going to absolutely love the 5 books and book series that I have chosen in regards to this. So, we're gonna start off with one of the most loved books, which is also, of course, part of a quadrilogy to so many people. It's The Lunar Chronicles by Marissa Meyer. So, this was the first time that I actually said to myself, even though I had already been influenced to read The Maze Runner, it was also more because of the fact that a movie was coming out based on it, so I wanted to read it before the movie. But The Lunar Chronicles, starting with Cinder, this was the time where I actually said to myself, if BookTube is raving and absolutely loving this series, how could I possibly hate it? This was the first time that I ever actually read a retelling of a fairy tale. I loved the fact that it had a science fiction, fantasy, almost even an anime vibe to it, and I had so much fun with Cinder. And as I moved on, I did enjoy the series as a whole. I actually will admit I was not the biggest fan of the last 2 books, but I am going to give you guys a little bit of a tease. I am planning on rereading the Lunar Chronicles for a major project coming in 2020, but this was the book that really got my passion for reading back to where it was before I went to grad school to get my master's, because when I was getting my master's degree, I was not reading for pleasure. So when I finally finished my master's degree, I wanted to go back to that great place that I was, where I was just picking up book after book after book and reading. This one was the driving force, the one that really made me get back to picking up book after book after book, wanting to know what's out there. What can I read next? This was so much fun. Definitely one of the best, and I cannot thank BookTube enough for recommending this incredible 4-part story. The next book, the next book, which is part of a trilogy, probably one of the coolest and most incredible and most visual book series I have ever read. Have you guessed it? Can you guess it? Okay, fine, I'll tell you. Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. This is one of the greatest trilogies that I ever read. This was the Lord of the Rings of the 21st century to me. I love the magic system. I adore the characters. I could not get over how visual the action sequences were in this. After reading a book like Mockingjay and wanting to throw it across the room after being so disappointed, I needed a book like this. And Well of Ascension and The Hero of Ages are just as incredible. And now that I've read it, and I actually buddy read this with my friend Lisa over at Lisa Rhiannon, we just loved this trilogy. And I want to read the next trilogy. When I found out that there really was another Mistborn trilogy, I was like, oh, I gotta read this. And on top of that, in less than a year after finishing the trilogy, I actually went to BookCon and met Brandon Sanderson and got the box that this and my other 2 books came in signed by him. And he really is one of the coolest people that I have ever met. And it was just so cool to finally actually meet an author and just say to him, thank you very much for these books. They're fantastic. And now I want my Mistborn Trilogy movie. There has to be a trilogy of films to go with these books, because even though these action sequences are so incredible, the story is so deep, this can turn into an awesome movie, and I really hope that it does one day. And Brandon Sanderson, when I met him, he did agree. So that made me even more excited, so who knows. Now we're heading into the top 3, and this actually now is my 3rd favorite book of all time. It is Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. I love this book. I love the movie, even though they are 2 completely different entities. The movie is still just as fun, and I love the fact that Steven Spielberg actually directed this film. But the book is a pop culture fanatic's wet dream, so of course I had to read this book, especially as a kid who came out of the 80s and someone who loved 90s pop culture, even going back to the late 70s. There is so much amazing nostalgia in this book for me. So the fact that there was a book that really spoke to my generation and even spilled out to the younger generations, this is one of the more popular books out there right now. BookTube loves it, and I read this twice already. It really is one of my favorite reads of all time, and I will gladly read this one over and over and over again, even though I know the outcome, and also because of the fact that I appreciate the book on its own and the film on its own. That shows you why this book is so special to me. The rereadability is there just as much as the rewatchability for the film. If you have not read Ready Player One, I highly recommend that you do, because I think that you will love it. And feel free, if you don't get any of the pop culture references, to reach out to me. I will educate you, and I will be happy to do so. Number 2 is the first installment of a soon-to-be trilogy that has become my favorite 2019 read. And it was also a series that I was very skeptical about because of my attitude towards the preceding series that this author wrote. But superheroes, that's a little something that is very dear to me, and that, of course, is Marissa Meyer's newest sensation, the Renegades saga, and I was so on the fence with this one. I didn't know if I was going to want to love it or if I was going to hate it. I wasn't sure, but Marissa Meyer, you know, the Lunar Chronicles was a revolution in the world of books. I had a feeling, especially because of the fact that it was revolving around superheroes and it wasn't a fairy tale retelling, I had a feeling that there could be something here that I would enjoy. But I didn't think I was going to love it as much as I did. This and the follow-up, Arch Enemies, are 2 of the best books that I have read in the last couple of months. I had so much fun with this read. I think that Marissa Meyer's writing has vastly improved with Renegades. I love the characters. I love how she doesn't make the heroes and the villains black and white. There are so many shades of gray. I love Nova. I love Adrian. They are all such incredible characters, and I also really love how she writes her action sequences. She's not Brandon Sanderson. I will make that statement right now, but she does make very well done action sequences, and also she really gets you to love villains. There are some truly devious, evil villains in this book, and I absolutely adore them. And also, for those of you who do appreciate representation, there is a great deal of diversity in this story, but the most important thing is she makes these diverse characters very human, so whatever skin color or sexual orientation they are, she makes it known, but it doesn't drive the story, and that's another thing that I really appreciate. Also, there is a love story in this book, and it also is not a main driving force. It is very secondary compared to the major plot in the book. But such a great read. I love this book to death. I love Arch Enemies. I cannot wait for Supernova. And this is also going to give me the incentive to reread the Lunar Chronicles and see which series is better. And that brings us to my number 1 book that I have read because of BookTube. And here's the backstory. I bought this book in mass market paperback when I had just gotten out of my freshman year of college. So this book was sitting on my shelf for almost 20 years. I had not picked it up. I don't know why I even had the book, because I had no intentions of picking it up, and the days just went by when the book was just collecting dust. But then YouTube gave me the BookTube community, and I saw that there were just so many people that were reading so many books, and then I found out that this book was finally going to become a motion picture, even though it already had a TV special attached to it starring the great Tim Curry. Have you figured out what it is yet? Stephen King's It. Thanks to BookTube, I wanted to bring something that was not really being talked about in the BookTube community. I know that there are people that do read a lot of horror, but there aren't that many booktubers that talk about horror, or Stephen King for that matter. Sometimes he is mentioned, but there really needs to be more Stephen King talked, because there's so many great stories out there that is written by Stephen King. And of course, the movie, when it was coming out, I wanted to finally read this book before the movie came out so I can compare and contrast, and I'm just going to say this right now. This is now my #1 favorite book of all time. The atmosphere, the characters, the story. Pennywise is not so much jump scare as he is atmospheric and creepy. Such a thing that just lingers in the shadows while you're reading the pages of this book. And my God, does it make your skin crawl. The movie is also fantastic. I cannot wait for It Chapter 2 to come out this September, which is why I am now in the middle of rereading it, and I am buddy reading this with my friend Lisa over at Lisa Rhiannon, who has not read this book yet, and she is a big Stephen King fan, so she is even more excited to finally tackle this book. And so far, I'm only a little over 100 pages in my reread, and let me just say, I'm already floating. Read this book. Even if you are not a horror fan, you will be incredibly blown away by the depth of this story and the crazy development of these amazing characters. You will really get attached to them while you're reading this book, and I cannot recommend it enough. And that's it, everybody. Those are my 10 books or book series that I have read because of BookTube, and I really want to thank all of my collaborators who joined me for this adventure today. Thank you so much. For all of you who are going to BookCon, please have an amazing time. I'm hoping that I will get back one day, and when I do, I will be looking forward to seeing you if you do in fact return. But in the meantime, thank you all once again for watching. Please put your comments in the box below and let's discuss. I'd love to know which books or book series were read by you, because BookTube wouldn't stop screaming and raving about them. I'm really excited to hear some of your recommendations. So I'll see you guys in the next one. Hey, thank you so much for stopping by my channel today. If you're new here and want to see more of what my channel has to offer, please click on the link to my last video, or hit that subscribe button to be kept up to date with all of my uploads. Content of all sorts is posted here quite often, so trust me, you do not want to fall behind. I will see you in the comments, and actions speak louder than words.